Elena arrived at the Hartley residence on a cloudy morning, her small suitcase in hand and her heart pounding with anticipation. She had been hired as a live-in nanny for the Hartleys' only child, 5-year-old Lucas. The house was grand but cold, filled with silence despite its beauty. Mrs. Hartley welcomed her with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, while Mr. Hartley offered a firm handshake and a brief nod. Lucas peeked shyly from behind his father, then ran to hug Elena's legs after only a few hours together. Her gentle nature had won him over immediately. Days turned into weeks, and Elena found herself quickly adjusting to the household routine. She woke early, prepared Lucas's meals, took him to the park, and read him bedtime stories. Mr. Hartley was rarely home before nightfall, buried in work and late meetings. Mrs. Hartley, though physically present, seemed emotionally detached from her son, from the house, from her own husband. She spent most of her time attending charity events, fitness clubs, or locked away in her art room. Elena noticed how often Mr. Hartley came home exhausted, greeted with nothing more than a passing glance from his wife. Occasionally, she would see him watching Lucas play with a sadness in his eyes. One evening, Lucas fell ill with a fever, and Mrs. Hartley left Elena alone to manage. Mr. Hartley returned earlier than usual and sat by Lucas's bedside, visibly worried. Elena had placed a cool cloth on the child's forehead and softly hummed a lullaby. Mr. Hartley stood silently at the door for a few minutes, then murmured, "Thank you." From that night on, there was a shift, barely noticeable at first. Mr. Hartley began to linger longer in the mornings, making casual conversation with Elena over coffee. Once, he complimented her cooking when she made a simple breakfast, because the chef was off. "Reminds me of my mother's kitchen," he said softly. Elena smiled, unsure how to respond. Mrs. Hartley didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she did, but didn't care. She rarely acknowledged Elena's presence unless giving instructions. Elena often found herself alone in the quiet of the night, wondering what kind of love once existed in this house. Late one evening, Elena passed Mr. Hartley in the hallway after checking on Lucas. They both paused. The hallway was dimly lit, the silence thick. He looked at her, really looked, and for a second neither moved. Then Lucas called out, breaking the moment. Elena nodded slightly and continued walking, heart pounding as she closed her bedroom door behind her. Alone, she stared at the ceiling, unsure why she couldn't forget the way his eyes lingered on her just moments before. Elena tried to push the moment in the hallway from her mind, but it clung to her thoughts during quiet mornings and long afternoons. Mr. Hartley's behavior subtly changed. He began to ask Elena how her day was, listened with genuine interest, and once left a book on the kitchen counter she had mentioned liking. She convinced herself it was just kindness, but her heart told her otherwise. The emotional distance between Mr. and Mrs. Hartley became more obvious. They barely spoke, and when they did, it was stiff, functional. One morning, Lucas ran to Elena, clutching a drawing he made of her, Mr. Hartley, and himself, calling it "my family." The innocent gesture left Elena stunned. She didn't know how to explain it, or if she even should. Mr. Hartley chuckled when he saw the drawing, but quickly became quiet. "He sees more than we think," he said under his breath. Elena smiled politely, but kept her thoughts buried. That evening, after putting Lucas to bed, she found a single rose on her dresser. There was no note, but she knew who had left it. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked it up, unsure if she should feel touched or alarmed. In the following days, Mr. Hartley started spending more time at home, especially on weekends. They took Lucas to the park together, played board games, and even cooked lunch as a group. Mrs. Hartley stopped joining altogether, often citing migraines or personal errands. Elena noticed her growing detachment but never asked questions. She wasn't in a position to. One rainy evening, the house lost power for a few hours. With Lucas asleep, Mr. Hartley and Elena lit candles in the kitchen. They talked, really talked, for the first time. He spoke about his loneliness, how the marriage had lost meaning years ago, how he stayed for Lucas. Elena listened, caught off guard by how open he was. She shared a little about her own upbringing, her longing for a home that felt like a family. Their hands brushed as they reached for the same candle. He didn't pull away. Neither did she. The silence afterward was louder than the storm outside. Before anything could be said, Mrs. Hartley returned home unexpectedly. She said nothing about the dimly lit kitchen or their startled expressions, but her eyes lingered. Elena couldn't sleep that night. She sat at her desk and began writing a letter, an honest letter, to Mr. Hartley. She poured her confusion, guilt, and feelings into it, but didn't sign or seal it. She folded it neatly and placed it in her drawer. She didn't know what scared her more, that he might read it or that he never would. Mrs. Hartley had grown suspicious. Her instincts, dulled by years of emotional distance, sharpened. She began watching more closely, her eyes following Elena with silent scrutiny. Without warning, she installed discreet security cameras around the house, claiming it was for Lucas's safety. No one questioned her. Elena didn't even know they were there. Mr. Hartley's emotional dependence on Elena deepened. One morning, while Lucas played in the other room, he confessed what had been growing unspoken between them. "I feel something I haven't felt in years," he whispered. Elena froze, torn between fear and longing. She didn't stop him when he leaned in and kissed her. It was soft, brief, but it crossed the line. They said nothing afterward, both knowing what it meant. Elena's guilt consumed her. She avoided his gaze the next day, focused only on Lucas, trying to pretend nothing had happened. But Mr. Hartley continued to find excuses to be near her, to say things that implied more than he should. She told him they needed to stop, that it wasn't right, but he insisted he hadn't loved his wife in years. "You make this house feel alive again," he said, ignoring her pleas. Meanwhile, Mrs. Hartley quietly gathered evidence. She had seen enough in the recordings to confirm her suspicions, but she didn't react immediately. Instead, she planned her revenge carefully. A week later, during a family dinner with close friends and relatives, she announced she had a surprise video to share, a collection of sweet home moments, she claimed. The footage played. Silent clips of Mr. Hartley touching Elena's arm, of glances, smiles, lingering moments. Then the kiss. Gasps filled the room. Elena's heart dropped. She stood frozen as everyone turned to look at her. Whispers began. Mrs. Hartley sat calmly, victorious. Mr. Hartley jumped up, defending Elena, shouting that it was never about betrayal, that he had fallen in love again. His words only made it worse. Elena ran. She didn't pack. She didn't explain. That night, she disappeared without saying goodbye. On the kitchen counter, she left a sealed envelope. Inside was the letter she had written weeks before, now signed, now final. She apologized to both of them. Not for falling in love, but for allowing herself to get lost in something that was never hers to begin with. Mr. Hartley stayed behind, broken. Lucas cried for Elena, but no one had answers. The house, once tense but warm in its own way, turned cold again. Mrs. Hartley said nothing. She got what she wanted. And yet, no one seemed to win. Months passed, but Elena's absence remained a silent echo in the Hartley household. Lucas stopped asking about her after a while, though he still clutched the drawing he'd made of them. Creases and fading colors, the only proof of a memory no one dared speak of. Mr. Hartley withdrew into himself. His relationship with his wife collapsed completely after the dinner scandal. They lived under the same roof, but barely acknowledged one another. Divorce papers sat unsigned on the kitchen table for weeks, untouched. Elena had moved to a quieter town, taking up a job at a small daycare where no one knew her name or past. She kept her head down, avoided unnecessary attention, and focused entirely on the children. But at night, when the world quieted and her thoughts grew louder, she replayed it all. The kiss, the letter, the look in Lucas's eyes when she left without goodbye. No closure. No forgiveness. Just silence. One afternoon, an envelope arrived at the daycare front desk. No return address, but she recognized the handwriting instantly. Inside was a letter from Mr. Hartley.
It wasn't romantic.
It wasn't bitter. It was raw. He wrote about the emptiness that followed her departure, about Lucas's confusion, about how the silence between him and his wife had turned into open hostility. He admitted his failures, not just to Elena, but to his son, to his marriage, to himself. The final line said, "You are the only moment of truth in a house built on pretense." Elena didn't respond. She couldn't. The damage had been done, and no letter could undo the pain caused. She kept the letter in a drawer, locked away with the rest of the memories she didn't dare unpack. Her heart still ached, but her guilt weighed heavier. It wasn't just about falling in love with a man she shouldn't have. It was about forgetting herself in the process. Back at the Hartleys, Mrs. Hartley filed for divorce quietly. She moved out with minimal notice, leaving Lucas behind with his father. Her presence had long ceased to make a difference. Mr. Hartley, now a single parent, struggled to balance his demanding work and raising Lucas alone. But over time, he softened. He let go of the bitterness. He focused on being a better father, if nothing else. Years later, Lucas, now older and more curious, found the drawing again. He asked his father who Elena really was. Mr. Hartley didn't lie. He told him she was someone kind, someone who made their world feel alive for a short while. Lucas asked where she went. Mr. Hartley replied, somewhere she could finally be free. In her quiet apartment, Elena looked out the window at children laughing on the street. A small smile crept across her face. Her heart was no longer heavy with guilt. Just memory. What they had wasn't meant to last, but it had changed them all. That, she finally understood, was the real ending. Not tragic. Just human.